scatter, running in all directions. You stand your ground, confident in your citizenship, but Martha grabs your arm, pulling you into the brush. Papers don't matter, she hisses. They take everyone, sort it out later. Could be days in detention. You watch from hiding as agents round up dozens of workers. Some protest in English, showing papers, proving citizenship. The agents are unmoved. Everyone goes into the trucks. That night, the camp is half empty. Families separated, children crying for missing parents. The work crew the next day is similarly depleted. The farmer, furious at losing half his workforce just as the harvest peaks, pays the remaining workers an extra $1 per day. Economics, Martha says, with dark humour. Supply and demand. Fewer workers, higher wages. But the raid has other consequences. Trust is damaged, community bonds frayed, everyone eyes newcomers with suspicion. Are they workers or informants? The solidarity that made survival possible is harder to maintain. By December 1931, you've saved nearly $200, a fortune by current standards. The question is what to do with it. Banks aren't trusted. Carrying cash is dangerous. Many workers send money home to families, but you have no dependents. Martha suggests investment, not in stocks. No one trusts the market anymore, but in tools, skills, something tangible. Man I know in San Diego, she says, teaches auto repair from his garage, $20 for the course, always need mechanics, depression, or no. It's an appealing idea. A skill no one can take from you, useful anywhere. You decide to head to San Diego after the Imperial Valley harvest ends. The mechanic's name is Gus, a former Ford factory worker who set up shop when the Detroit plant reduced shifts. His school is just his garage with 2 cars in various states of disassembly. Welcome to the University of Hard Knocks Automotive Division, he jokes when you arrive. There are 3 other students, a teenager who dreams of racing cars, a middle-aged man recently laid off from a shipping company, and a woman in her 30s who plans to take over her father's repair shop. Lady Mechanic, the teenager says with obvious skepticism. She fixes him with a level stare. My dad lost his right arm in France during the war. Been doing most of the work myself for years, just never got the certificate. Gus is an excellent teacher, patient but demanding. For 6 weeks, you learn about engines, transmissions, electrical systems. The work is challenging, satisfying in a way picking crops wasn't. You're building something, not just harvesting what others have planted. San Diego itself is suffering less than many cities. The naval base provides stable employment for thousands. Military budgets, while reduced, haven't been cut as drastically as other sectors. There's a certain irony. The one part of government spending Hoover doesn't slash is defense. Your fellow students become friends. You share meals, stories, hopes for what comes after the Depression. The teenager, Jimmy, is the most optimistic. My uncle says it'll turn around this year, he insists one night over beans and rice in Gus's kitchen. Stock market's up from its lows, banks are more stable. The woman, Rebecca, snorts. Your uncle been saying that since 29? Jimmy flushes. This time's different. Hoover's got new plans. Hoover's a damn fool, says the middle-aged man, Frank, waiting for the natural business cycle to fix things. Meanwhile, people starve. The conversation turns to politics, as it increasingly does everywhere. 1932 is an election year. President Hoover, once hailed as a brilliant administrator and humanitarian for his work feeding Europe after the Great War, is now perhaps the most hated man in America. Who's running against him, you ask? Democrats haven't picked their candidate yet, says Gus. But word is it'll be Roosevelt, governor of New York. Any good? Asks Rebecca. Gus shrugs. Hard to say. Rich man, like all of them, but had polio, can't walk without braces. Maybe suffering teaches compassion. The conversation drifts to news from abroad. Things in Germany are deteriorating rapidly. The Nazi Party is now the second largest in the Reichstag. Hitler came close to winning the presidency, forcing aging war hero Paul von Hindenburg into a runoff. My cousin's husband is Jewish, says Rebecca. They're leaving Berlin, coming to New York, says it's getting dangerous. Why blame Jews for the economy? Jimmy asks, genuinely confused. Doesn't make sense. Sense has nothing to do with it, kid, Frank says. Fear makes people stupid. Scared people want someone to blame. In January 1932, shocking news comes from Asia. Japan has invaded Manchuria, a resource-rich region of northern China. The Imperial Japanese Army, acting without clear authorization from Tokyo, has seized a massive territory and established a puppet state. The world watches, does nothing. The League of Nations issues condemnations, but no concrete actions. Western powers, consumed by their own economic crises, have no appetite for confronting Japan. It's a chilling precedent, aggression unpunished, territorial conquest achieved through force, a lesson that won't be lost on other expansionist powers. Your auto repair course ends in February. Gus gives each student a certificate, homemade but official looking. More importantly, he gives recommendations. Buddy of mine runs a garage in Santa Monica, he tells you. Could use someone with your attention to detail, won't pay much starting out but room to grow. It's the most promising opportunity you've had since the crash. A chance for stable employment, for settling in one place, for beginning to rebuild a life. The bus ride to Los Angeles takes you through landscapes transformed by the Depression. The highways are dotted with hitchhikers, whole families walking with their possessions on their backs, makeshift camps in the roadside woods. Outside the small town of Oceanside, you see a sign that stops your heart. Bonus Army Recruiting Station. Veterans March on Washington. Join up here. The Bonus Army. You've heard about it on the radio. World War veterans, promised a service bonus to be paid in 1945, are demanding early payment due to the Depression. Thousands are planning to march on Washington to pressure Congress. The bus stops briefly in Oceanside. You step off to stretch your legs and approach the recruitment station, just a card table with two aging veterans. You serve? One asks. You shake your head, just curious. Hell of a thing, he says. Fought for our country. Now we're fighting for what we're owed. Planning to have 20,000 veterans in DC by June. Think it'll work? You ask. He shrugs. Has to. I got kids to feed. Bonus would mean $2,000 for me. Difference between starving and surviving. Back on the bus, you ponder what might happen if the government refuses the veterans' demands. 20,000 trained soldiers, desperate, angry, converging on the capital. Could it lead to revolution, to military coup? America's democratic traditions seem strong, but hunger changes the rules, as that policeman in Baton Rouge said. Los Angeles appears on the horizon, sprawling and hazy. Despite the Depression, it's growing, fueled by the fledgling movie industry and the migration of Dust Bowl refugees. The contrasts are stark. Opulent Beverly Hills mansions, visible from Hooverville shantytowns, gleaming new office buildings next to soup kitchens with lines around the block. Your new job at the Santa Monica garage starts poorly. The owner, Hank, is nothing like Gus. Impatient, critical, quick to anger. The pay is lower than promised, 20 cents an hour instead of 30. But it's steady work and you're indoors and your back doesn't ache every night like it did in the fields. You rent a small room in a boarding house near the beach, $5 a week, including breakfast. It's the first real home you've had since leaving your New York apartment in 1930. The other boarders are a mix of the barely employed, a movie studio janitor, a part-time secretary, a night watchman. Everyone's struggling, but they've held on to these threads of normalcy. A roof, a bed, regular meals. One night in April, sitting on the boarding house porch, you witness something that encapsulates the madness of the Depression economy. On the beach, city workers are burning oranges, thousands of them piled high and set aflame. The night watchman, Ed, explains, government buys surplus crops to keep prices up. Can't give them away. That would drive prices down, so they destroy them. The sheer insanity of it, food being destroyed while people go hungry, leaves you speechless. The economics might make some theoretical sense, but the human reality is obscene. The next day at work, a well-dressed man brings in a brand new Packard for service. While Hank fawns over him, you change the oil, check the belts, top off fluids. It's routine work, but the car itself is a marvel, evidence that not everyone is suffering equally. Movie producer, Hank tells you after the man leaves. They're still making money hand over fist. Seems the worse things get, the more people want to escape to the pictures. It's true. Despite, or because of, the Depression, Americans are flocking to cinemas. For a quarter, they can forget their troubles for 2 hours, lose themselves in glamour and adventure and romance. The movie industry is one of the few thriving sectors of the economy. That weekend, flush with your weekly pay, you treat yourself to a film, Public Enemy, starring James Cagney. The theatre is packed, the audience raucous, when Cagney's gangster character rises from poverty to wealth through crime. Some in the crowd cheer. The moral comeuppance at the end is met with boos. It's another sign of changing attitudes. Pre-crash, such a reaction would have been unthinkable. Now, traditional notions of morality are bending under economic pressure. If banks can steal life savings, if governments can burn food while children starve, why shouldn't an ordinary man turn to crime? May brings news that the bonus army is growing larger than expected. Veterans from across the country are converging on Washington, building a massive encampment. President Hoover refuses to meet with them. Congress debates the bonus bill half-heartedly. The boarding house gets a new resident, a journalist named Helen, who works for a small left-wing newspaper. Her stories focus on labor disputes, union organizing, the conditions in worker camps. At dinner each night, she shares news that doesn't make the mainstream press. Steel workers in Pennsylvania just called a strike, she announces one evening. 5,000 men. Company brought in armed guards. There's going to be violence. Cops or National Guard? Asks Ed. Both, Helen says grimly. Governors in the company's pocket. This too is becoming commonplace. State power deployed to break strikes, protect property, maintain an economic order that's failing most Americans. The facade of neutrality is wearing thin. In June, shocking news arrives from Washington. The Senate has rejected the bonus bill. The bonus army camps remain, growing larger and more permanent. The veterans vow to stay until they receive justice. Helen returns from a reporting trip to the Imperial Valley, where you worked months earlier. They're organizing, she says excitedly. Farm workers, both Mexican and American, demanding higher wages, better conditions. It's unprecedented. Won't last, says Ed. They'll just bring in the cops, break it up. Maybe, Helen acknowledges, but something's changing. People aren't afraid anymore. What's the worst that can happen? Poverty? They're already there. She's right. Across America, a new militancy is emerging. Coal miners in Kentucky, auto workers in Michigan, textile workers in Massachusetts. Strikes and organizing drives are spreading despite violent opposition from employers and authorities. The Depression is entering its 4th year. The initial shock has worn off. The hope for quick recovery has died. What remains is a grim determination, a growing anger, a radical questioning of the system itself. In your small room, you sometimes take out the dollar bills from your weekly pay and stare at them. These pieces of paper, once so reliable, have been revealed as fragile constructs, their value dependent on collective faith that has been severely shaken. If money can evaporate overnight, if work doesn't guarantee survival, if governments burn food while people starve, what other certainties might prove false? What other foundational assumptions might crumble? These are the questions being asked across America, across the world, as the Great Depression grinds on, and the answers, when they come, will reshape global politics, economics, and society for decades to come. The old order is dying. What will replace it remains uncertain. But in boarding houses and Hoovervilles, in farm fields and factory floors, in the corridors of power and the back rooms of radical politics, the future is being negotiated, fought over, born in pain and possibility. And you, like millions of others, are caught in this historical current, swept along by forces beyond individual control, trying simply to stay afloat while the world transforms around you. July 1932 brings news that stops conversations mid-sentence. President Hoover has ordered the US Army to clear the bonus army from Washington. Your boarding house gathers around the radio, listening in stunned silence as the announcer describes tanks rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue, cavalry charging with sabers drawn, infantry advancing with bayonets fixed, all against unarmed veterans, many with wives and children. Jesus Christ, whispers Ed, the night watchman. They're using gas against their own soldiers. The details are horrific. Troops commanded by General Douglas MacArthur, against direct orders, pursued the veterans across the Anacostia River and burned their camp to the ground. 2 veterans killed, dozens wounded, including a 12-week-old baby who died from tear gas exposure. "This is how republics die," says Helen, the journalist, her voice shaking with anger, "when armies march on citizens." That night, none of you sleep well. The radio keeps broadcasting updates, each more disturbing than the last. Photos in the next day's papers show Washington in flames, American soldiers attacking American veterans, families fleeing with whatever possessions they could grab. "This will end Hoover," predicts your landlady at breakfast. "No coming back from this." She's right. The bonus army attack becomes a political catastrophe for an already unpopular president. With the election just months away, Herbert Hoover, once regarded as a humanitarian genius for feeding starving Europeans after the Great War, has cemented his image as callous and cruel. Franklin Roosevelt, the Democratic nominee, doesn't need to attack Hoover directly. The contrast speaks for itself, Roosevelt promising a new deal for the American people, while Hoover sends tanks against hungry veterans. Work at the garage continues, though business is slow. Fewer people can afford cars, and those who have them put off repairs as long as possible. Hank cuts your hours, then your wages. By August, you're making barely enough to cover your room and board. But you're luckier than most. At least 25% of Americans are completely unemployed. Millions more work reduced hours for reduced pay. Homelessness has reached unprecedented levels. Entire families living in parks, under bridges, in makeshift shanty towns. The presidential campaign dominates conversation. Roosevelt's promises of direct federal action, jobs programs, banking reform, support for farmers spark hope. But there's skepticism too. "Rich man born with a silver spoon," says Frank, a fellow mechanic at the garage. "What does he know about suffering?" "He knows about disability," counters Helen. "Man can barely walk from polio. That changes your perspective." One evening, Helen brings a guest to dinner, a German journalist named Werner, who's reporting on the American Depression for newspapers back home. His observations are chilling. What happens here is mirrored in Germany, but worse, he explains. Our unemployment is 30%, maybe higher. Inflation destroyed savings years ago. Now this depression destroys everything else. And Hitler? Someone asks. Werner's face darkens, rising. Nazis now largest party in Reichstag. Not majority, but plurality. Hitler demands to be Chancellor. Will it happen, you ask? I fear yes. Traditional conservatives think they can control him. Werner gives a bitter laugh, like thinking you can control a tiger once you let it out of its cage. The German situation feels distant, academic almost, compared to the immediate crisis in America. But the connections are becoming clearer. The financial collapse that began on Wall Street in 1929 has destabilized governments worldwide, created openings for extremists, pushed nations toward conflict rather than cooperation. Werner shares stories from other European countries, Britain forcing civil servants to take pay cuts, France struggling with government paralysis, Spain declaring itself a republic after the king fled. Everywhere, the old order is under pressure, cracking, sometimes collapsing. In September, you lose your job at the garage. Hank can't afford to keep 3 mechanics with business so slow. As the newest hire, you're the first cut. He seems genuinely regretful. Keep your tools, he says gruffly. Good mechanic like you will find something, but you don't. Not in Los Angeles anyway. The city is flooded with job seekers from the Dust Bowl states, willing to work for almost nothing. After 2 weeks of searching, you face a hard truth. It's time to move again. The question is where. Winter is coming, making the northern states less appealing. The Dust Bowl continues to devastate the plains. California is better than most places, but competition for jobs is fierce. You decide to head east, toward Arizona and New Mexico. There's talk of government projects starting up, dams, roads, bridges, the kind of heavy construction that needs mechanics to maintain equipment. Before leaving, you write to your parents in Chicago, the first contact in over a year. The letter is brief, apologetic for the silence, assuring them you're surviving, asking about their situation. You leave the boarding house address for any reply. The bus east is half empty, unusual for Depression-era transport. The driver explains why. Borders closed, he says, during a rest stop in San Bernardino. Arizona police turning folks back if they don't have money or confirmed jobs, $100 or proof of employment. They can do that? Stop American citizens from entering a state? The driver shrugs. Been doing it for months. Call it immigration inspection. Really, they're just keeping out the poor. You count your money. $87, not enough to guarantee passage, but you've learned a few things about survival in these years on the road. At the next stop, you hide most of your cash in your shoe, keeping just $5 in your wallet. If questioned, you'll show your mechanic's certificate, claim you have a job waiting. The border crossing is as described. California Highway Patrol on one side, Arizona officers on the other. They board the bus, checking each passenger. Business in Arizona? Asks a square-jawed officer when he reaches your seat. Mechanic, you reply, showing your certificate from Gus's course. Got work waiting in Phoenix. He eyes you skeptically. Where at? You give the name of a garage you saw in a newspaper ad. He seems satisfied, moves on. The man behind you isn't so lucky. No job, only $12 to his name. The officers escort him off the bus. Through the window, you watch him standing forlornly on the roadside as you pull away. Phoenix in October is pleasantly warm after the coastal chill of Los Angeles. The city is suffering, like everywhere, but less severely than some. The surrounding agricultural areas provide some economic cushion. You find work at a construction company maintaining trucks and earth-moving equipment. The pay is decent, 40 cents an hour, and the job relatively secure. The company has contracts for several government projects, including a new dam on the Salt River. The boarding house you find is more basic than the one in Santa Monica, but clean and affordable. Your roommate is a surveyor named Paul who works for the same construction company. Or road projects mostly, he explains when asked what the company builds. Government finally figured out that paying men to build highways beats paying them to do nothing. These aren't formal federal programs, not yet, but state governments, counties and cities are increasingly funding public works to create employment. It's still inadequate, reaching only a tiny fraction of the jobless, but it represents a shift in thinking. As Election Day approaches, the campaign intensifies. Hoover, knowing he's likely to lose, becomes more desperate, warning that Roosevelt's plans amount to socialism, that federal relief will destroy American self-reliance, that only traditional market solutions can restore prosperity. Roosevelt counters with confidence and optimism, promising action instead of ideology. His campaign song, "Happy Days Are Here Again," becomes an anthem of hope. On November 8, 1932, the nation votes. The results are decisive. Roosevelt wins 42 states to Hoover's 6. Democrats take control of both houses of Congress. It's a mandate for change, a repudiation of Hoover's hands-off approach to the crisis. But the election creates a dangerous vacuum. Roosevelt won't take office until March 4th, 1933, 4 months away. This gap, later viewed as dangerously long, will lead to the 20th Amendment, moving inauguration to January. For now, a repudiated president remains in office while conditions continue to deteriorate. December brings news from Germany that confirms Werner's fears. President Hindenburg has appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor, believing the conservative cabinet will control the Nazi leader. The tiger is out of its cage. Mark my words, says a history professor who stays at your boarding house while visiting Phoenix. This man Hitler will not be controlled. Europe is sleepwalking toward disaster. His words echo in your mind as Christmas 1932 arrives, your 4th since the crash. The holiday is subdued at the boarding house, though someone produces a small tree decorated with homemade ornaments. Everyone contributes to a common dinner, more food than many have seen in months. To 1933, Paul raises a glass of cheap wine. Can't possibly be worse than 32. But it begins worse. In January, news comes that food riots have broken out in several cities. In Iowa, farmers have blocked roads, preventing produce from reaching markets, demanding higher prices. In Detroit, former auto workers have seized a Ford plant, occupying it until police drove them out with tear gas. February brings the attempted assassination of President-elect Roosevelt in Miami. The bullet misses him, but kills Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. The nation holds its breath. How much more can the system take? Then, just days before Roosevelt's inauguration, the banking system finally collapses completely. Years of pressure, bank runs, failing loans, vanishing reserves culminate in total seizure. Banks across the country close their doors. Currency becomes scarce. Commerce grinds to a halt. Your construction company suspends operations. They can't make payroll with banks closed. You're out of work again, though the foreman assures everyone it's temporary, just until the banks sort themselves out, he promises. But no one believes the banks will simply sort themselves out. The financial system that underpins modern capitalism is in cardiac arrest. Only massive intervention can restart it. On March 4th, 1933, the nation gathers around radios to hear Roosevelt's inaugural address. His words crackle through the static. "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." The room falls silent as he continues, acknowledging the crisis directly, offering no magic solutions but promising action, immediate, concrete action. "This nation asks for action, and action now. I shall ask the Congress for broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency, as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe." The response is electric. For the first time in years, there is a sense that the government will actually do something, not wait for natural recovery, not protect the interests of banks and businesses at the expense of ordinary people, but take direct action to alleviate suffering. Roosevelt's first act comes immediately, declaring a national bank holiday, closing all financial institutions to prevent further collapse. Then, in a flurry of activity that will become known as the 100 Days, his administration pushes through legislation, creating jobs programs, regulating banks, supporting farmers, establishing a social safety net. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, is among the first programs announced. Young men will work on environmental projects, building parks, planting trees, controlling erosion, in exchange for food, housing, and $30 per month, $25 of which must be sent home to their families. Your roommate, Paul, is ecstatic. Finally, someone actually doing something instead of just talking about market corrections and natural cycles. People need jobs. Roosevelt's creating them. Not everyone is pleased. Your landlord, who owns several properties, complains bitterly about socialism and handouts. A banker who boards with you warns of inflation and government overreach. But they're minority voices now. Most Americans, desperate after 4 years of suffering, welcome any change from the status quo. By April, your construction company restarts operations, bolstered by new federal contracts for road building. The work is steady again, the pay reliable. It's not prosperity, not even close, but it's stability, a platform to stand on rather than quicksand. Letters finally arrive from your parents. Their situation in Chicago has been difficult but not desperate. Your father's job as a postal worker provided security when little else did. They're relieved to hear from you, eager for you to visit when possible. The shame that kept you away seems foolish now, a relic from before the crash when individual failure carried stigma. The Depression has taught a different lesson, that economic disaster can strike anyone, that survival depends more on luck and systemic factors than personal virtue or vice. You write back, promising to visit when you can save enough for the journey. For the first time in years, such planning seems reasonable rather than fantasy. May brings news of the Agricultural Adjustment Act designed to raise crop prices by paying farmers to produce less. It's counterintuitive economics, deliberately reducing supply to increase prices, but the alternative has been demonstrated. Bumper crops that farmers can't sell at any profit, food destroyed while people go hungry. The National Industrial Recovery Act follows in June, establishing codes of fair competition, minimum wages, maximum hours. It's an unprecedented government intervention in the economy, directly challenging the laissez-faire approach that dominated American capitalism for generations. Critics call it un-American, unconstitutional, the end of free enterprise. Supporters call it salvation, the necessary evolution of capitalism to save it from its own excesses. History will render complicated verdicts on the New Deal. Some programs will work, others fail, some will be struck down by the Supreme Court, others will become permanent features of American life. But in the moment, in 1933, what matters is that someone is finally acting with urgency and purpose. The sense of abandonment that characterized the Hoover years has been replaced by engagement. The government is no longer a bystander to suffering, but an active participant in relief. By summer, the first cautious signs of recovery appear. Unemployment remains catastrophically high, still over 20%, but no longer rising. Industrial production increases slightly. Bank deposits, protected now by the new Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, begin to grow as confidence returns. In Germany, meanwhile, Hitler consolidates power with terrifying speed. Opposition parties are banned, trade unions dissolved, a compliant Reichstag passes the Enabling Act, giving Hitler dictatorial powers. Jewish businesses are boycotted, then seized. Book burnings eliminate un-German literature. Letters from Werner, the German journalist, grow increasingly desperate, then stop altogether. Helen learns through colleagues that he's fled to France, part of the first wave of refugees from Nazi persecution. The news from Europe serves as a chilling reminder of what might have happened in America without the pressure valve of democratic change. The same economic disaster that brought Roosevelt to power in the US delivered Germany into Hitler's hands. Different systems, different cultures, different outcomes, but the same underlying cause. In July, you finally have enough saved to consider the trip to Chicago. Paul convinces you to wait until Labor Day weekend, when the company shuts down for 3 days, giving you time for a proper visit without risking your job. The cross-country journey by bus is a survey of America in the early stages of recovery. Signs of the Depression remain everywhere. Abandoned farms, shuttered factories, men still riding the rails or hitchhiking in search of work. But there are also new sights. CCC camps with young men in uniform building roads and parks, Public Works Administration, PWA projects constructing schools, courthouses, bridges, farmers ploughing fields under government programs. The bus passes through northern Arizona, where Navajo and Hopi reservations have been particularly hard hit. Traditional economies already marginalized by decades of federal policy have been devastated by the Depression. Here, New Deal programs are making little headway, their benefits flowing primarily to white communities. In New Mexico, you see the strange juxtaposition of ancient pueblos and modern conservation projects, CCC workers building flood controls to protect structures that have stood for centuries. Crossing the plains, evidence of the Dust Bowl is inescapable. In western Kansas, the bus drives through a dust storm, not a major black blizzard, but bad enough to reduce visibility to yards, to coat everything inside the bus with fine grit despite closed windows. Faces of farmers visible through the murk are stoic, resigned, as if they've accepted apocalypse as their daily condition. Chicago, when you finally arrive, is both familiar and transformed. The city of your childhood retains its physical shape, its distinctive architecture, its lakefront beauty, but the human geography has changed dramatically. Hoovervilles dot the parks, breadlines circle blocks, factories that once roared with production stand silent. Your parents' modest home in a working-class neighborhood is unchanged, though showing signs of deferred maintenance. The reunion is emotional, your mother crying, your father pretending not to. 4 years of separation, of uncertainty, of worry, dissolved in tearful embraces. They've aged more than time alone would explain. Your father's hair, dark when you left, is now mostly grey. Your mother's face carries new lines, her hands more gnarled from work. The depression has extracted its toll even from those who maintained employment. Over dinner, simple but abundant, clearly prepared with savings and care, they share stories of neighbourhood changes. The Millers next door lost their house to the bank. The Kavanaghs down the street took in relatives from the countryside. The corner store now operates on credit and barter, as much as cash. And Mr. Petrovich, you ask? Remembering the stern baker who gave you your first job as a delivery boy. Your parents exchange glances. Killed himself in 31, your father says quietly, after the bank took his shop. The human cost of economic disaster, measured not just in jobs lost and homes foreclosed, but in lives shattered, families separated, suicides, stress-induced illnesses, dreams abandoned. Statistics can't capture the depth of suffering, the psychological trauma of a system collapsing. You share your own journey. New York to Kansas to California to Arizona, the jobs taken and lost, the people met, the scenes witnessed, your parents listen with expressions mixing pride at your survival and horror at what you've endured. We wanted to send money, your mother says, but we didn't know where you were, and things were tight here too. I know, you assure her. I wouldn't have taken it anyway. Too stubborn. Your father chuckles. Still got that quality, I see. The visit passes too quickly. 3 days of catching up, reconnecting, promising more regular contact in the future. Then it's back on the bus, returning to Arizona, to your job, to the life you've constructed from the wreckage of the crash. As the bus pulls away, your mother waves from the porch, your father standing stoically beside her. You wonder when you'll see them again, or if. They're aging, the world remains unstable despite Roosevelt's efforts. The recovery is fragile, incomplete, potentially temporary. The return journey feels different. Where the outbound trip surveyed an America beginning to heal, the return seems to emphasize how much damage remains, how far the nation still has to go. In Iowa, you pass a farm auction, a family's possessions spread on the yard, their land and equipment being sold to cover bank debts. The family stands to the side, the children crying, the parents stone-faced. It's a scene repeated thousands of times across rural America. At a rest stop in Nebraska, you meet a family traveling west. Father, mother, 4 children crammed into a rusted car with their belongings tied to the roof. The father speaks with a mixture of desperation and hope. Heard there's work in Wyoming, he says. Dam project, government work. You don't have the heart to tell him about the hundreds who line up for each job on government projects, the preference given to local residents, the likelihood of disappointment. Let him keep hope alive a little longer. As the bus crosses the Colorado-Utah border, the driver announces news heard on the radio at the last stop. The National Recovery Administration, NRA, has established new codes for the auto industry, raising minimum wages to 40 cents an hour, reducing the work week to 35 hours, abolishing child labour. Good for workers, good for the economy, declares an older man across the aisle. More money in pockets means more spending means more production means more jobs. Socialism, mutters another passenger. Government telling business what to do. It's un-American. The debate that has divided the nation since Roosevelt's inauguration plays out in microcosm on a Greyhound bus crossing the desert. Is the New Deal a necessary evolution of capitalism or its destruction? Is it temporary emergency measures or permanent transformation? Does it go too far or not far enough? What no one questions anymore is the government's responsibility to act. The laissez-faire approach of the early Depression years has been thoroughly discredited. The debate now is about how to act, not whether to act. As Phoenix appears on the horizon, you reflect on the journey. Not just this bus ride, but the 4 years since the crash. You've traversed the continent, worked dozens of jobs, witnessed suffering on a scale previously unimaginable in America, survived when many didn't. The Depression isn't over. Recovery is partial, fragile, unevenly distributed. Millions remain unemployed, homeless, hungry. The banking system, while stabilized, is fundamentally altered. International trade, crippled by tariffs and nationalist policies, remains far below pre-crash levels. And beyond America's borders, the global consequences of economic collapse continue to unfold. In Germany, Hitler's regime becomes more oppressive by the day. In Japan, militarists gain influence, pushing for expansion. In Spain, political divisions deepen, foreshadowing civil war. The Great Depression has reshaped not just economics, but politics, culture, social relations, individual psychology. It has demonstrated both human vulnerability to systemic failure and human resilience in the face of disaster. What comes next remains uncertain. Will Roosevelt's programs succeed in rebuilding the economy? Will democracy survive the pressures of extremism born from economic desperation? Will nations cooperate to restore international stability or turn inward toward nationalism and conflict? These questions hang in the balance as 1933 progresses, as you return to your job in Phoenix, as the world continues its painful evolution from the catastrophic collapse of 1929. What is certain is that nothing will be the same. The old certainties about markets, about government, about individual responsibility and collective obligation have been irrevocably altered. The world is being remade, for better or worse, in the crucible of economic disaster. Winter 1934 settles over Phoenix with surprising chill. The desert nights drop below freezing, and your boarding house's thin walls offer little protection. You and the other residents gather in the common room at night, sharing body heat and stories. Heard from my cousin in Oklahoma yesterday, says a new resident named Mac, a bricklayer working on a government school project. Says they've had 14 dust storms since January. 14. Can't see the sun for days at a time. The Dust Bowl is intensifying. What began as a curiosity, unusual dust storms in the plains, has become an environmental catastrophe unlike anything in American history. Years of overplowing combined with drought have turned the topsoil of America's breadbasket into a massive cloud of dirt that darkens skies from Texas to Nebraska. My sister sent me this, says Paul, your roommate, pulling a jar from his pack. Inside is nothing but dirt. Fine, almost like talcum powder. Swept it off her kitchen table in Amarillo. Said this much collects every day, even with the windows sealed. You uncork the jar and touch the dirt. It's impossibly fine, like nothing you've ever felt before. This isn't ordinary soil. It's the pulverized remains of farms, livelihoods, communities. There's no stopping it, Mac says grimly. Government's trying, planting trees as windbreaks, teaching different farming methods, but it's too late. That land is dead for a generation, maybe more. The environmental disaster compounds the economic one, creating a wave of migration unlike anything America has experienced. Hundreds of thousands of Okies, though they come from Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, and Colorado as much as Oklahoma, are fleeing west, looking for work, for survival, for escape from the choking dust. Your construction job has remained steady through the winter, though the company now operates differently under New Deal regulations, minimum wage standards, maximum hour restrictions, the end of child labor. The relationship between employers and workers is being fundamentally rewritten by federal mandate. Not everyone is pleased. Your boss, Mr. Sullivan, grumbles constantly about government interference and coddling workers, but he complies because the New Deal works as both carrot and stick, offering federal contracts to companies that follow the rules, shutting out those that don't. The changes are evident across Phoenix. The Public Works Administration is funding a new post office downtown, a school on the west side, improvements to roads and bridges. The Civilian Conservation Corps has camps in the surrounding mountains, employing young men to build fire breaks, trails, and campgrounds. It's far from a complete recovery. Unemployment nationally still hovers around 20%. Breadlines and soup kitchens continue to operate. Hoovervilles remain fixtures in every city, but there's a sense of direction now, of purpose, of systems being built to prevent the worst suffering. February brings alarming news from Europe. Austrian Nazis, emboldened by Hitler's success in Germany, attempt a coup, assassinating Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss. The coup fails, but only due to intervention from Mussolini's Italy, which fears German expansion toward the Mediterranean. It's coming, predicts a professor who gives weekly talks at the YMCA. Another European war. The Depression has destabilized everything, empowered extremists, left democratic governments weak and discredited. The international news feels distant until a German family moves into your boarding house, refugees who fled Hitler's regime with little more than the clothes on their backs. Heinrich was a lawyer in Berlin, his wife Ava a teacher. Now they work menial jobs. He as a janitor, she as a hotel maid, while struggling to learn English. First, they take Jewish jobs, Heinrich explains one evening in halting English. Then Jewish businesses, then Jewish homes. We see what comes next, so we leave. Their presence makes the European situation visceral, immediate. These aren't just newspaper headlines or radio reports. They're human lives disrupted by the same economic forces that reshaped your own existence. In March, you receive a promotion at the construction company, foreman of the mechanical shop, overseeing repairs and maintenance for the growing fleet of trucks and earth-moving equipment. The pay increase is substantial, 65 cents an hour, nearly double what you made before. For the first time since the crash, you begin to save money beyond an emergency fund. The promotion brings new responsibilities, new challenges. You're supervising men now, some older and more experienced than yourself, making decisions that affect others' livelihoods. One of your first tests comes when a young mechanic named Charlie consistently shows up late, his work sloppy and incomplete. The old you might have fired him immediately. Jobs are scarce, workers replaceable. But something makes you ask questions instead. My wife's sick, Charlie confesses when confronted. TB, I'm up all night with her, then take her to the sanatorium for treatments before work. Pre-depression tuberculosis treatment was expensive but available. Now the public health system is overwhelmed. Treatment facilities have waiting lists. Medications are rationed. Charlie and his wife have fallen through gaps in the safety net, their lives becoming collateral damage of economic collapse. Or start your shift an hour later, you tell him. Make it up at the end of the day and talk to Helen at my boarding house. Her newspaper did a story on a new federal TB program. Might help your wife get better treatment. It's a small act of solidarity, of recognition that survival now depends on mutual support, on bending rules, on seeing the humanity behind economic transactions. The same lessons that Martha taught you in the California fields, that Joe showed you in the Central Park camp. That strangers demonstrated through 100 small kindnesses during your cross-country journey. April brings the worst dust storm yet, a massive front that begins in the plains but carries eastward, darkening skies as far as Washington, D.C., dropping dirt on the White House lawn, coating ships in New York Harbor. They're calling it Black Sunday. Looked like the end of the world for some, reads a letter from your mother in Chicago. Sky turned dark as night at noon. Couldn't see across the street. Everyone thought it was the second coming or worse. The biblical scale of these storms feeds apocalyptic thinking. Preachers claim divine punishment for America's sins. Scientists warn of permanent ecological damage. Farmers abandon generations-old homesteads, loading families into broken-down cars, heading west on Route 66 toward an uncertain future. You see these migrants daily now in Phoenix, drawn by rumours of agricultural work, of New Deal projects, of opportunity. Their cars and trucks piled high with furniture and clothes become familiar sights. License plates from Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Nebraska. Hollow-eyed children peering from windows, parents with faces aged beyond their years. Local reaction is increasingly hostile. Arizona workers-only signs appear at job sites. Police harass migrant camps. Politicians demand closing the state borders. "Bunch of damn Okies coming to take our jobs," complains a truck driver in the shop. "Go back where you came from." And where exactly should they go back to? You challenge him. Their farms are gone, blown away, there's nothing left. He has no answer, just mutters something about "not our problem" and walks away. The tension between compassion and self-protection, between recognizing common humanity and fearing for one's own security, plays out across America as the migration intensifies. It's a tension you've seen before in California fields where white workers resented Mexicans, in Kansas rail yards where locals viewed outsiders with suspicion, in 100 communities where scarcity bred distrust. May brings dramatic news. Dust storms have reached the Atlantic, ships reporting dust settling on decks 300 miles offshore. President Roosevelt pushes for the Soil Conservation Act, creating the Soil Conservation Service to combat erosion and develop sustainable agriculture practices. It's part of a second wave of New Deal programs, more ambitious and far-reaching than the first. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, launches, eventually employing millions on public projects, building schools, hospitals, airports, roads, bridges. The National Labour Relations Act guarantees workers' right to unionize and bargain collectively. The Social Security Act creates a permanent system of old age pensions, unemployment insurance, aid to dependent children. These programs represent a fundamental reimagining of government's role in economic life, not just emergency response, but permanent structural change. Critics call it socialism. Supporters call it necessary evolution. Either way, it's a revolution in American governance. In Phoenix, the impact is immediate. WPA projects break ground across the city, employing thousands. Social security offices open, processing applications for the new programs. Labor organizers work openly, protected now by federal law. Your construction company lands more government contracts, expanding operations, hiring additional workers. The mechanical shop grows to 15 men under your supervision. Your wage increases again, 75 cents an hour, more money than you've ever earned. With this newfound stability, you rent a small house near the boarding house, just 2 rooms, but private, your own space for the first time since leaving New York. The furnishings are minimal: a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a radio. But it's yours, a home rather than a temporary shelter. The change feels significant, symbolic. You're putting down roots after years of drifting, making a life rather than simply surviving. You're not alone in this cautious optimism. Across America, people are beginning to rebuild, not to pre-crash prosperity, but to a new stability. Marriage rates increase after years of decline. Birth rates rise slightly. Consumer spending edges upward. Theatre attendance grows. Small luxuries become possible again. But the recovery is fragile, uneven, incomplete. Unemployment remains far above normal levels. International trade is still crippled by tariffs and nationalist policies. Banking, while stabilized, operates under constraints unimaginable before the crash. And beyond American borders, the global consequences of economic collapse continue to unfold in increasingly dangerous ways. June brings news that shocks even a nation accustomed to violence. In Germany, Hitler has conducted a massive purge of his own party. The Night of the Long Knives leaves dozens, perhaps hundreds dead, Nazi killing Nazi in a brutal consolidation of power. This is what economic desperation produces, says Heinrich, the German refugee, when the news reaches Phoenix. Not just poverty, not just hunger, but monsters, men who promise solutions through violence, and people desperate enough to believe them. His words carry special weight coming from someone who fled Hitler's Germany, who saw firsthand the transformation of a democratic republic into a dictatorship. The connection between economic collapse and political extremism, already theoretical, becomes concrete. The summer of 1934 brings intense heat to Phoenix, days above 110 degrees, nights offering little relief. Work at the construction sites slows, shifting to early mornings and late evenings to avoid the worst heat. In the mechanical shop, you institute a rotation system, allowing workers to take cooling breaks every hour. Mr. Sullivan objects initially, lost productivity, coddling workers, but relents when several men collapse from heat exhaustion on the same day. Keep 'em alive? Or keep 'em working, you challenge him. Can't have both in this heat. It's a confidence you wouldn't have had in earlier years, standing up to the boss, advocating for workers. But the New Deal has shifted power dynamics, given Labour a stronger voice, created protections that make such advocacy possible without immediate termination. July brings alarming news from the Midwest. Labor conflicts turning violent. In Minneapolis, striking truckers, battle police and company guards. In Toledo, Autolite workers face National Guard troops. In San Francisco, a general strike shuts down the entire city after police kill 2 longshoremen. The strikes represent another aspect of the Depression's impact, the radicalization of American workers, their growing militancy, their willingness to confront both employers and authorities. Years of exploitation and desperation have worn away deference, made conflict preferable to continued submission. The news reaches Phoenix through radio reports, newspaper headlines, letters from relatives in affected cities. Local reactions are mixed, some expressing solidarity with striking workers, others condemning communist agitators, many simply worried about further economic disruption. Your own sympathies lie with the strikers, shaped by years of witnessing exploitation, of being the exploited, but you also recognize the complexity, how strikes can hurt other workers, how violence can alienate public support, how extremist elements can co-opt legitimate grievances. These tensions play out in your own workplace when organisation efforts begin at the construction company. A WPA representative approaches workers during lunch breaks, discussing unionisation, collective bargaining, the protections offered by the National Labour Relations Act. Mr. Sullivan responds with threats. Anyone who signs a union card will be fired, contracts will be lost if wages increase, the company will close rather than operate under union rules. It's a bluff. Firing workers for unionising is now illegal, and government contracts depend on following labour laws, but it's effective at creating fear. You find yourself in a difficult position, sympathetic to the organising effort but responsible for maintaining production as shop foreman. When workers ask your opinion, you're carefully neutral, though you make clear you won't report anyone's union activities to management. August brings personal news that breaks through the political tension. Paul, your former roommate, is getting married. The ceremony will be small at the boarding house where you both once lived, but he wants you as his best man. The bride is a WPA administrator named Margaret who came to Phoenix from Washington to help establish local programs. Their courtship has been brief but intense, a common pattern in uncertain times where traditional extended relationships seem like unaffordable luxuries. The wedding is simple but joyful. A handful of friends gathered in the boarding house parlour, the landlady providing cake, a local minister officiating. Paul wears his only suit, Margaret a blue dress rather than traditional white. Their rings are inexpensive steel rather than gold or silver. Yet there's something beautiful in the simplicity, in the determination to build a future together despite ongoing hardship. It represents a collective decision across America that life must continue, that human connections matter, that the depression can take livelihoods, but not the capacity for joy, for love, for community. The reception afterward becomes a community celebration. Someone produces a record player. Furniture is pushed aside for dancing. For a few hours, the depression recedes, becomes background rather than foreground. You find yourself talking with a young woman named Sophie, a friend of the bride who works as a teacher in a WPA adult education program. Her parents were Italian immigrants, her accent still carrying traces of New York, where she grew up. Came out here for the job, she explains, teaching English to migrant workers, basic literacy to adults who never had proper schooling, pays terrible but work's meaningful, you know? You do know that balance between economic necessity